I want you to imagine something for a second. Just kind of put yourself in this scenario. You're on a trip, maybe somewhere incredibly remote.
Like backpacking through a mountainous region or something?
Yeah, exactly. Miles away from the nearest major city. And you're hiking near a fast-moving river. You lose your footing on a slick rock, and your smartphone just goes tumbling out of your pocket.
Oh man, the absolute worst feeling.
Right. It goes straight into the rapids. You watch it sink. It is gone. Completely unrecoverable. Now, for most of us living in the world today, that isn't just an inconvenience.
No, not at all.
It is a minor, localized catastrophe. You haven't just lost a piece of glass and metal. You've lost your wallet, you've lost your boarding passes.
Your main line of communication with your family.
Exactly. You've lost your two-factor authentication, which means you can't even log into a laptop to access your email. I mean, in a very real modern sense, you have lost your primary method of proving that you are who you say you are.
Yeah, it's a complete disconnection from modern infrastructure. You are effectively locked out of society until you can physically transport yourself to a brick and mortar store, buy a new, usually very expensive piece of hardware, somehow recover your SIM card, and then spend hours, if not days, authenticating yourself back into your own life.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really highlights just how fragile our current digital existence actually is. We are entirely tethered to these fragile little devices.
We really are. But now I want you to imagine a completely different version of that exact same scenario. You watch your phone sink to the bottom of that river, and you just shrug.
Just shrug it off.
Yeah. You walk a few miles down the trail until you reach the nearest small village. You walk up to a complete stranger, someone you have never met who happens to be holding like a cheap, battered, low-end smartphone. And you politely ask to borrow it for a second. You tap the screen. You look into the front-facing camera so it can map the geometry of your face. Or maybe you just press your thumb to a biometric sensor on the back. And instantly, I mean without a single loading screen, your entire digital life manifests on that stranger's device.
Like magic.
Right. Your bank accounts are there, your private encrypted messages, your government ID, your travel documents, all of it. Accessible without typing a single password, without downloading some massive cloud backup, purely through that biometric scan.
And then when you hand it back.
The second you hand the phone back and log out, no trace of your data remains on that hardware. It is as if you were never there.
You know, if that sounds like a scene from a cyberpunk movie to you, you are definitely not alone in thinking that. But according to the massive stack of research, leaked manifestos, and tech analysis we are unpacking today, that scenario isn't science fiction at all. It is the literal blueprint for the next decade of human infrastructure.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we are exploring a sweeping, incredibly provocative collection of writings today. Specifically, this is centered around a March 2026 tech blog by Paramendra Kumar Phagat. And the entire framework here revolves around a really radical concept called the Everyone app.
Right. Not an everything app, an everyone app.
Exactly. And today, we are setting out to determine a few monumental things in this deep dive. We need to figure out what exactly separates an everything app from an everyone app. We're going to explore why this massive bundled software model has absolutely conquered the Eastern Hemisphere but completely failed to take root in the United States.
Which is a huge anomaly in the tech world.
It really is. And perhaps most ambitiously, we are going to examine how this exact technological stack might actually hold the key to eradicating extreme global poverty.
The scope of what we're analyzing today is just vast. We are looking at the fundamental mechanics of a platform designed to essentially erase digital friction. We'll be diving into the architecture of existing global super apps that are dominating emerging markets right now, places like Southeast Asia and India.
And China, obviously.
Oh, of course. We're going to put China's WeChat under a serious microscope because, mechanically speaking, it is arguably the most successful piece of software in human history.
Yeah, the numbers on WeChat are just wild.
Well, they really are. And then we'll dissect the stubborn resistance of the Western consumer market. And finally, we will break down a very specific, multi-billion-dollar philanthropic proposal involving Mackenzie Scott and the country of Malawi.
That part is so fascinating.
It is. It tests whether direct, biometrically verified cash transfers can completely bypass traditional foreign aid bureaucracy.
The stakes here are fascinating because we aren't just talking about, a new way to post photos or order a pizza. We're talking about a fundamental rewiring of human inclusion. Who gets to participate in the global economy and who gets left behind simply because they don't have the right piece of hardware in their pocket.
And to ground our conversation right from the start, we really have to recognize that these topics, stuff like global biometric identification, universal basic income mechanics, tech monopolies, data surveillance, they naturally spark intense regulatory and political debates.
Oh, they are incredibly charged topics.
Very charged. So our approach today is to look at the machinery impartially. We are going to relentlessly question the why and the how. Why do these systems succeed so spectacularly in some environments? How do they function on a technical level? We are here to break down the sheer technological and sociological reality of this blueprint without getting bogged down in the partisan politics that usually surround them. We just want to see how the engine works.
Right, exactly. So let's dive right into the core vision of the Everyone app. The defining concept here rests on one unbreakable, non-negotiable principle. It has to be frictionless. The barrier to entry must be essentially zero.
Zero friction.
Right. There can be no gatekeepers, no hardware requirements, no expensive data plans. And to achieve this, the blueprint is built on two massive technological pillars. The first is ubiquitous, free satellite internet, specifically leaning on low Earth orbit constellations like Starlink. And the second is a globally interoperable biometric identification system.
And those two pillars directly attack the two largest choke points of global digital inclusion, which are connectivity and identity.
Yeah.
When we look at the billions of people who are currently offline right now, we're talking about farmers in remote rural areas, refugees in transit, populations in regions with collapsed infrastructure. The current model of the internet is fundamentally broken for them. It assumes a baseline of stability that they simply do not have.
I was trying to think of a way to visualize this shift because the way we currently interact with apps is very much like owning a car.
Okay, how so?
Well, to participate, you need to buy the vehicle, right? The smartphone. You need to pay for the gas and the toll roads, which is your monthly data plan and your internet service provider. You have to maintain it, update the operating system, keep the battery charged, and worry about where you park it so it doesn't get stolen. It is a highly individualized, high-maintenance endeavor.
That's a great point. It requires constant upkeep.
Exactly. But the Everyone app vision operates on a completely different paradigm.
Yeah.
It's more like a magical, omnipresent public transit system. You don't need to own the bus. You don't need to pave the roads. You just show your face at the station, the doors slide open, and you are immediately on board heading wherever you need to go in the global economy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and take that transit analogy even further, imagine if that train didn't just take you places, but actively adapted to whatever environment it was passing through.
What do you mean by that?
Because the first pillar, connectivity, requires a massive architectural shift in how software is actually built. Traditional apps assume you have a reliable, constant broadband connection. If you open, say, a Western banking app on a weak 3G signal, what happens?
It just spins forever, times out, and crashes.
Exactly. The Everyone app framework completely flips that assumption. It operates on what they call an offline-first architecture. It relies on satellite internet like Starlink, beaming access to every point on Earth, deserts, rainforests, oceans. But it doesn't assume that the connection is always perfect.
Wait, how does an app function if it's offline? Like, if I don't have a signal, I can't send a message or make a payment, right?
So mechanically, an offline-first app is designed to handle tasks asynchronously. It is optimized for intermittent power and low bandwidth environments. Let's say you are in a village where the satellite signal is temporarily blocked by heavy storm clouds. Or maybe you only have power to charge your device for a few hours a day. You can still open the app, you can draft messages, you can log basic transactions, queue up financial transfers, and just interact with the interface normally. The software stores all of this locally on the device in a highly compressed format.
Oh, I see.
And then the split second, a satellite beam passes overhead and a signal is acquired, the app fires off all that queued data in a microscopic, encrypted burst and instantly downloads any incoming data. It isn't trying to stream a high-resolution video. It is sending tiny packets of essential data in milliseconds. It is engineered from the ground up to assume the connection is fragile, which makes inclusion the default state rather than a luxury.
Okay, that makes sense technically. But here's where I have to push back a little bit. The blueprint outlines this low Earth orbit satellite access as being free to the end user. No data caps, no roaming fees, no monthly subscription. We're talking about launching, maintaining, and constantly replacing thousands of satellites in space. Who exactly is footing the bill for a multi-billion-dollar physical space infrastructure if the 8 billion end users aren't paying a monthly fee? I mean, somebody has to pay for the rockets.
It's the most critical economic question to ask. How does the math actually work? And the answer lies in the profound macroeconomic impact of total global connectivity. The framework argues that the economic ripple effects of bringing the unbanked, unconnected billions into the formal economy are just staggering. We are talking about a projected global GDP boost measured in trillions of dollars.
Trillions with a T.
With a T. When you bring a shadow economy into the light, several things happen. Suddenly, microtransactions can be taxed, small businesses can access global microloans, scaling their operations. Supply chains become hyper-efficient because, say, a farmer in a remote province can check real-time global commodity prices on the app before selling their crop, completely bypassing predatory local middlemen.
So the argument is that the infrastructure cost of Starlink isn't a charity expense for these companies. It's a loss leader.
Precisely.
Global conglomerates, international banks, and governments will happily subsidize the space infrastructure because doing so expands their total addressable market by 3 or 4 billion people. If you want to sell products or financial services or AI tools to the developing world, you need them online and banked. So you fund the satellites to build the digital shopping mall.
That is precisely the underlying logic. The value created by a fully connected, globally banked human population generates so much taxable revenue, transaction fees, and market liquidity that it easily eclipses the actual cost of the satellites.
Which brings us back to the identity component, that biometric login on a borrowed phone we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The blueprint calls this Aadhaar 2.0, sort of evolving the concept from India's massive national biometric ID system. But mechanistically, I get really hung up on the privacy aspect here.
A lot of people do. It's a huge hurdle.
Right. Because if I scan my face on a stranger's phone in a remote village, how on earth does a global database verify my identity without centralizing all my personal data into one giant, terrifying honeypot just waiting to be hacked?
This is where we really have to look at the cryptography behind the vision, specifically a concept called zero-knowledge proofs. Because traditional identity verification is incredibly clunky and, honestly, very intrusive.
Oh, for sure.
If you go to a bar and the bouncer needs to know if you are over 21, you hand them your driver's license. But to prove your age, you are forced to also reveal your home address, your exact birth date, your height, your weight, and whether or not you're an organ donor.
Right, it's a massive privacy leak just to buy a drink.
Exactly. You are oversharing data to prove a single binary fact. A zero-knowledge proof solves this digitally. Imagine if, instead of a plastic card, you handed that bouncer a cryptographically sealed digital token. The bouncer scans the token, and the light simply flashes green or red. Yes, they are over 21, or no, they are not.
And they don't see anything else.
Nothing. The bouncer learns absolutely nothing else about you. They gain zero knowledge of your actual data, only the mathematical proof of that specific claim.
That is wild.
The Everyone app uses this on a massive scale via a decentralized blockchain-anchored ledger. When you scan your face, the app doesn't send a picture of your face to a central server to match against a JPEG file. It creates a mathematical hash, a highly complex string of numbers based on the geometry of your biometrics. It checks that hash against the ledger, and the ledger simply confirms, yes, this hash matches the owner of this specific digital wallet.
So it proves I am who I say I am, unlocking my specific encrypted data from the cloud without ever actually storing my biometric geometry or my personal details on that specific piece of hardware. I can log in, access a globally valid bank account, send digital currency to anyone, completely bypassing the slow, expensive SWIFT banking networks, by the way, and then log out, leaving zero footprint.
That is the architecture. It treats hardware as completely disposable and interchangeable. The individual's biometric signature is the only persistent key in the entire system.
It sounds incredibly elegant on paper. I mean, it really does. But to figure out if this is actually viable in the real world, we have to pivot. Because we don't have to guess if a bundled, frictionless platform can take over a society. We just have to look at the everything apps, the super apps that are currently running the daily lives of billions of people in the Eastern Hemisphere right now.
Yeah, the transition from theory to reality is stark when we look east. A super app is fundamentally a mobile platform that bundles multiple everyday services into one seamless interface. We are talking about messaging, payments, ride-hailing, e-commerce, food delivery, and finance all living under one roof.
It's the whole internet in one app.
Basically, the explicit goal is to become an ecosystem so indispensable that a user literally never has a reason to open a competing application. And the market value of these platforms is projected to reach anywhere from $500 to $800 billion by the early 2030s.
Let's do a global tour of how these empires were built, because they didn't start out trying to be everything. They started by fixing one very specific, very painful problem in their local markets. Look at Southeast Asia. The blueprint describes this region as the home of mobility-first super apps, specifically Grab and Gojek.
Gojek is a perfect case study in how to build a super app by untangling physical chaos. So Gojek launched in Indonesia around 2010. If you look at Jakarta, it is one of the most densely populated, traffic-choked cities on the planet. Traditional public transit was heavily strained, so the local solution was the Ojek, which are informal motorcycle taxis.
Right.
You would negotiate a fare with a driver on a street corner, hop on the back of the bike, and they would just weave through the gridlock.
But it was completely decentralized and informal. You didn't know if the price was fair, you didn't know if the driver was safe, and the drivers themselves spent half their day just sitting on corners waiting for a fare.
Gojek formalized that shadow economy. They started as a simple call center and evolving to an app that matched riders with Ojek drivers, standardizing the pricing and providing accountability. They solved the most visceral daily friction point for millions of people, which was just the daily commute.
And that's the hook.
Exactly. Once you have millions of people opening your app twice a day just to get to work, you have captured their attention. But more importantly, you have earned their trust. From there, the layering begins. If a driver can weave through traffic to bring you to work, they can weave through traffic to bring you noodles. So food delivery is added.
And once you're paying for rides and food, the friction of typing in a credit card number every single time becomes really annoying, especially in a region with a massive unbanked population who might not even have credit cards to begin with.
Exactly. So Gojek launches GoPay. They build a digital wallet right inside the app. Suddenly, users are loading cash into this wallet to pay for rides. But once the money is already sitting in the GoPay ecosystem, why not let them use it to pay their electricity bill? Why not let them transfer money to a family member? Why not offer microinsurance or small business loans? Gojek evolved from a motorcycle taxi app into the foundational financial infrastructure of the entire region.
So Southeast Asia proves you can build a digital empire by untangling physical traffic. But what happens if the physical infrastructure is fine, but the currency itself suddenly vanishes? That brings us to India and the unbelievable rise of Paytm.
Paytm's explosion is tied to a very specific historic catalyst, which was the 2016 demonetization in India. In November 2016, the Indian government made a shocking announcement. In an effort to fight corruption and black money, they instantly invalidated all 500 and 1,000 rupee notes.
Just overnight.
Overnight. Roughly 86% of the physical cash in circulation became worthless paper unless it was deposited in a bank.
I want you to picture the absolute panic of a society that runs almost entirely on physical cash, suddenly losing its medium of exchange. The lines stretching around the block of banks, ATMs completely running dry, people couldn't buy groceries, small merchants couldn't sell goods. It was an overnight crisis of liquidity.
And Paytm had launched years earlier as a simple platform for prepaying mobile phone minutes. But they had a digital wallet feature. When demonetization hit, Paytm wasn't just a convenient app anymore. It became a literal lifeline for survival. Millions of consumers and small merchants flocked to the platform because they desperately needed a way to transact without physical rupees.
And mechanically, Paytm had a massive advantage here because they didn't have to build the banking plumbing from scratch. They built their services on top of the Indian government's UPI rails, the Unified Payments Interface.
Yes, UPI is key here.
Wait, let's explain UPI really quickly because it's crucial to understanding how this scales. UPI is essentially an open-source, government-backed protocol that allows instant, real-time bank-to-bank transfers via mobile phones. It's not a private walled garden like Venmo, where the money sits in a Venmo account. It's the physical tracks that allow money to move instantly between any two banks. Paytm just built a really slick, user-friendly train station on top of those tracks.
And building on that government infrastructure allowed Paytm to scale at a blistering pace. They captured the merchant ecosystem, offering QR codes for street vendors to accept digital payments instantly. From that payments foothold, they expanded into an all-in-one hub for shopping, booking train tickets, and managing wealth.
Okay, so we've seen mobility in Indonesia, we've seen payments in India. Let's look further east at Japan and South Korea, where the empires were built on messaging-first platforms. And the origin story of Japan's Line app is incredible because, much like Paytm, it was born out of a massive crisis.
Right. In March 2011, the Choku earthquake and subsequent tsunami devastated Japan. It was a catastrophic event. And in the immediate aftermath, traditional cellular networks completely collapsed. The voice circuits were either physically destroyed or hopelessly overloaded by millions of people trying to call their loved ones simultaneously. You simply could not make a phone call.
But here's the technical nuance. While the voice circuits failed, packet-switched data networks, which is the infrastructure that handles internet traffic, were far more resilient. Data packets can actually route around damaged nodes in a network.
Engineers at NHN Japan realized this and desperately needed a way for their own employees to communicate. They rapidly developed Line as a data-based messaging app. It worked when nothing else did. People could text their families to tell them they were alive when traditional telecom failed.
Wow.
And when your app provides that level of utility during a national trauma, the trust you build with your user base is practically unbreakable. From that core messaging utility, Line expanded. They added culturally specific features, like their famous expressive sticker packs, which perfectly suited Japanese communication styles. Once you have a nation opening the app 50 times a day to chat, you introduce Line Pay for digital wallets, Line Taxi for rides, and Line Shopping. It now utterly dominates Japan and is deeply entrenched in Taiwan and Thailand.
And South Korea has an almost identical parallel with KakaoTalk. Launched around the same time, it managed to capture an astonishing 90 to 97% of the South Korean smartphone market.
97%. That is almost total saturation.
Think about that market penetration. If you have a smartphone in South Korea, you have KakaoTalk.
Yeah.
It is the default layer of communication.
Yeah.
And from that monopoly, they spun out Kakao Pay, Kakao Bank, Kakao T for transit. The blueprint actually notes that when Kakao experienced a massive server outage in 2022 due to a data center fire, the entire country basically ground to a halt. People couldn't hail cabs, pay for coffee, or access government services. It revealed that Kakao wasn't just software anymore, it was national infrastructure.
When we synthesize all these case studies together, the blueprint outlines 5 distinct patterns of success. First is a high-frequency starting point. You must solve a daily problem, first messaging or commuting. Second is filling infrastructure gaps. These apps thrive where traditional banking or transit is highly inefficient. Third is the flywheel of network effects. The more merchants that accept GoPay, the more valuable GoPay is to users, which attracts more merchants.
It feeds itself.
Exactly. Fourth is cultural and regulatory fit. These platforms operated in mobile-first societies, often with governments that actively encourage digital inclusion. And fifth is profound economic impact. They didn't just extract wealth, they formalized shadow economies, empowering small businesses and driving GDP growth, which secured their social license to operate at such massive scale.
So what does this all mean? To distill the secret sauce of the Eastern Super App for you, the listener. They didn't succeed by offering more buttons to press. They succeeded by offering less friction. They look at chaotic environments, Jakarta traffic, a cash shortage in Delhi, a telecom blackout in Tokyo, and they smoothed it out. They became the digital gravity holding daily life together.
That's a great way to put it.
But to truly comprehend the terrifying magnitude of that gravity, we have to look at the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. We have to dissect China's WeChat.
The scale of WeChat, known as Weixin in China, just defies Western comprehension. Looking at the data from the 2025-2026 timeframe, it boasts roughly 1.4 billion monthly active users. To put that in perspective, that captures roughly 80% of China's entire smartphone-using population.
Let me throw some more numbers at you because they're staggering. It processes 45 billion messages every single day. WeChat Pay handles around 40% of China's total mobile payments, moving hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, at this scale, calling WeChat an app is a massive understatement. It is a national operating system.
The evolution of WeChat is honestly a masterclass in behavioral engineering. It was launched in 2011 by a Tencent engineer named Alan Zhang. It started very simply as a messaging tool, but its key differentiator early on was voice messaging.
Which was a brilliant cultural adaptation. Let's explain why. In 2011, smartphone keyboards were tiny and clumsy. Typing Chinese characters using pinyin on a small touchscreen was incredibly slow and frustrating for many users. Holding down a single button to record a crisp 3-second voice memo and letting go to send it was infinitely faster. It was a localized solution to a very specific friction point.
It gained massive traction because of that. But the pivotal moment, the moment WeChat transformed from a communication tool into a financial juggernaut, happened in 2013 with the launch of WeChat Pay.
This is where it gets crazy.
Right. The brilliance of WeChat Pay wasn't the underlying payment rails. It was the psychological hack they used to onboard users. Tencent digitized the centuries-old Chinese tradition of the red envelope. During the Lunar New Year, it is customary to give physical red envelopes filled with lucky cash to friends and family. Tencent built a feature where you could send digital red envelopes inside a WeChat group chat.
And the mechanics of this are pure genius. Imagine you're in a family group chat with 20 people. Someone drops a digital red envelope into the chat containing the equivalent of, say, $10, but the app randomizes how it's distributed. The first person to tap it might get $5, the next person gets 50 cents. It turned a cultural tradition into a highly addictive, competitive social game.
But here's the real mechanical hook. To open that digital envelope and claim your lucky money, you had to link your physical bank account to WeChat. People who would never have bothered to type their bank routing numbers into a messaging app were suddenly doing it in droves because they didn't want to miss out on the fun in the group chat.
FOMO is a powerful tool.
Exactly. In a single holiday weekend, millions of users hurdled the massive friction barrier of financial onboarding. Once your bank is linked to play a game, your wallet is now permanently embedded in the app for year-round payments.
It's a Trojan horse of convenience.
Right.
By 2016, WeChat Pay is everywhere. But the absolute masterstroke, the architectural shift that locked the ecosystem permanently came in 2017 with the invention of mini programs.
This is huge.
I want to spend a minute on mini programs, because this concept is exactly what the West struggles to understand. A mini program is a lightweight third-party application that runs entirely inside WeChat. You do not go to the Apple App Store to download it. It does not get an icon on your phone's home screen.
Right.
Think of it this way. Imagine your smartphone's operating system is an empty plot of land. In the Western model, you build a bunch of separate, standalone buildings on that land. Here is the bank building, here's the grocery store, here's the movie theater. To go from one to the other, you have to exit the building, walk down the street, and enter a completely new set of doors.
Context switch.
Yes. WeChat's mini programs are like building a massive, climate-controlled mega mall. Or, better yet, setting up a fully functioning farmer's market right inside your living room. You never have to step outside. You want to book a ride with Geety. You do it inside the WeChat living room. Order food inside WeChat. File your taxes, play a video game, book a doctor's appointment. All of those different vendors have set up little stalls inside the WeChat app. There are millions of these mini programs handling hundreds of billions in transactions, and Tencent controls the entire environment.
What's fascinating here is the physical mechanism that bridges the real world into this digital living room, which is the QR code.
Yep.
The blueprint identifies QR code ubiquity as central to the ecosystem.
Yeah, we don't really use them the same way here.
Right. In the West, we largely view QR codes as a mildly annoying way to look at a restaurant menu. In China, the QR code is the universal bridge between atoms and bits. Let's look at the mechanics of a transaction. A humble street vendor selling dumplings in Chengdu doesn't need to purchase an expensive point-of-sale terminal or pay massive credit card swipe fees. They simply print out a piece of paper with a QR code and laminate it.
A user buys a dumpling, opens WeChat, scans that piece of paper, and the money transfers instantly from their WeChat wallet to the vendor's WeChat wallet. The friction is completely gone. You see a shared bicycle on the street, you scan the QR code on the handlebars with WeChat, the bike unlocks, and the billing happens automatically in the background.
The integration is so absolute that users routinely spend hours every single day without ever leaving the WeChat interface.
I want you, the listener, to pause and think about your phone screen time right now. Think about the mental friction of how you operate. You open iMessage to text a friend to get dinner. You close it. You open Safari to look up the restaurant menu. You close it. You open Uber to book a ride there. You close it. You open your banking app to check your balance. You close it. You open Venmo to split the bill. You're constantly context switching, moving between walled-off buildings.
It's exhausting when you actually map it out.
In China, you don't context switch. You just stay in the mega mall. Leaving WeChat effectively means leaving digital society. It is the ultimate manifestation of the everyone app philosophy. Which brings us to a screeching, head-scratching halt.
The big question.
Yes. We are looking at a model that practically prints money. It defines modern convenience. It has conquered Asia, Southeast Asia, parts of Latin America. So why on earth do Americans still have a messy, cluttered folder of 40 different apps? Why has the super app completely face-planted in the United States, despite billionaires explicitly trying to force it into existence?
The U.S. anomaly is a fascinating sociological and regulatory study. The blueprint is unequivocal here. The United States market is structurally and psychologically hostile to the super app model. Meta tried for years to bundle payments into Messenger and failed. Uber tried to pivot from a ride app to an everything app and stalled. Elon Musk bought Twitter, rebranded it as X, and explicitly stated his goal was to build the Western super app, yet the needle really hasn't moved. The blueprint breaks this resistance down into 3 core pillars.
Let's start with the architectural roadblock, which is the regulatory environment and the Apple App Store.
Right. The U.S. landscape is actively allergic to this kind of corporate consolidation. We have strict antitrust enforcement and aggressive Department of Justice scrutiny. When a regulator in Washington looks at a company trying to own a citizen's messaging, banking, commerce, and digital identity, they don't see convenience. They see a terrifying monopoly and a massive systemic risk.
Absolutely.
If one app runs the entire economy and it suffers a server outage, the country stops. Regulators prioritize market competition over seamless integration.
And that regulatory stance is mirrored by the corporate architecture of the U.S. tech ecosystem, specifically Apple. The Department of Justice has actually pointed out that Apple's strict App Store policies are actively designed to prevent WeChat-style mini-programs from existing on iPhones.
Yeah, they guard that ecosystem fiercely.
Let's go back to the mall analogy for a second. Apple owns the physical land, the iOS operating system. They built a very profitable mall called the App Store, and they charge every store owner a 30% tax on sales just to be in their mall.
The famous Apple tax.
Right. Tencent in China was powerful enough to essentially build their own giant mall inside Apple's mall. Apple allows this in China because they have to. WeChat is just too powerful. If iPhone didn't have WeChat, no one in China would buy an iPhone. But in the US, Apple fiercely defends its territory. They enforce strict developer rules that make it incredibly difficult for a company like Meta or X to host fully functional monetized third-party apps within their own app. Apple acts as the landlord, and they flat out refuse to let a tenant open a competing mall in the lobby. The very structural foundation of the mini program is blocked by Apple's walled garden.
But even if Apple opened the gates tomorrow and the regulators stepped aside, the blueprint suggests the American consumer would still reject the platform. There is a massive cultural divide regarding privacy and data consolidation.
Americans have a deep, ingrained skepticism of corporate power. We have lived through the Cambridge Analytica scandal, endless massive data breaches, and highly publicized privacy violations. The idea of handing over our private chat history, our real-time GPS location, our bank balances, and our health data to a single tech giant triggers immediate visceral alarm bells. We fundamentally do not want one company holding all the master keys to our lives.
We prefer our data compartmentalized, which ties directly into the 3rd pillar of U.S. resistance. We already have a mature, highly competitive app ecosystem. The U.S. never experienced the severe infrastructure gaps that fueled the rise of the Eastern super apps.
Right, there was no void to fill.
Exactly. WeChat and Grab succeeded because the alternatives were terrible or simply didn't exist. They leapfrogged a broken system. The U.S. didn't need to leapfrog anything because the traditional infrastructure worked perfectly fine. We already had deeply entrenched, robust credit card networks with fraud protection. We already had iMessage for chatting. We had Uber for rides, Amazon for logistics, and highly developed insured banking apps.
Americans exhibit an aversion to what developers call feature bloat. We like lean, high-quality, single-purpose tools. If I want to listen to a podcast, I open Spotify. I don't want Spotify trying to offer me a mortgage or book me a taxi. I want it to play audio.
Exactly.
Because our baseline infrastructure functions well, we have the luxury of maintaining 40 different specialized digital relationships. There is no unbanked majority rushing to mobile digital wallets, and there's no catastrophic friction forcing us into a single ecosystem.
The U.S. market is essentially an oligopoly of highly specialized giants fiercely protecting their respective turfs.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I'm going to challenge the premise here. The blueprint concludes that Americans reject the everything app. But aren't Apple and Amazon functioning as super apps in disguise?
Oh, that's a fair point.
Think about Apple. I don't have an Apple app, but Apple has my credit card via Apple Wallet. It processes all my private communication via iMessage. It tracks my biological data in Apple Health. It handles my entertainment via Apple TV. It isn't a single downloadable app on a home screen, but it is an inescapable bundled ecosystem baked directly into the silicon of the hardware. Isn't that just a super app wearing a different suit?
The mechanics are different, but the outcome is remarkably similar. The blueprint actually acknowledges this nuance. The US is not immune to the desire for super app-like experiences. We just prefer them integrated at the operating system level rather than the application level. We trust the OS to orchestrate our specialized acts.
That makes a lot of sense.
The profound lesson here for the everyone app vision is that technology is never deployed in a vacuum. It must bend to local realities. You cannot brute force a centralized WeChat model onto an American regulatory and cultural framework that values decentralization and privacy. It simply will not take root.
This highlights a fascinating global tension. In the West, we have the immense luxury of demanding compartmentalization because our physical and financial infrastructure already works. We can afford to be picky and prioritize privacy. But for billions of people in the developing world, this technology isn't about the convenience of ordering a burrito without switching apps. It is about basic, fundamental economic survival. It is about establishing an identity and participating in the global market.
Yes, the stakes are completely different.
And that realization leads us into the final and undoubtedly most impactful piece of the blueprint. We've examined the theory, we've dissected the apps. Now we move to the application. The blueprint pivots to a massive, multi-billion-dollar philanthropic proposal that reads like the ultimate high-stakes test case for this entire technological stack.
It is a breathtakingly bold proposal directed specifically at billionaire philanthropist Mackenzie Scott. The core argument suggests that she could completely redefine global philanthropy. Rather than giving massive grants to traditional nonprofit organizations and NGOs, she could utilize the Everyone app infrastructure, the biometric IDs, and the satellite internet to wire $500 directly into the digital wallet of every single citizen in the country of Malawi.
Let's break down the sheer mathematics of this Malawi test case, because at first glance it sounds impossible, but the numbers are startlingly feasible. Malawi has a population of roughly 21 million people. If you execute a one-time unconditional cash transfer of exactly $500 to every single man, woman, and child, the total economic cost is roughly $10.5 billion.
To contextualize that figure, Mackenzie Scott donated over $7 billion in the year 2025 alone, and her total philanthropic giving since 2019 exceeds $26 billion. From a purely economic standpoint, a $10.5 billion single-country intervention is entirely within the realm of possibility for a highly motivated, ultra-wealthy individual.
But the capital was never the real hurdle in foreign aid. The real problem has always been the delivery mechanism. The blueprint takes a very harsh, critical look at what it calls the NGO industrial complex.
It's a very systemic critique.
Let's talk about leakage.
Huh.
In traditional foreign aid, if a billionaire donates $10 billion to build infrastructure or distribute food in a developing nation, how much of that actually reaches the person in poverty? The blueprint details the layers of bureaucracy. You have the international headquarters overhead, the marketing budgets, the six-figure salaries of Western consultants, the business class flights, the fleets of white land cruisers.
Right.
Then the money hits the local government level, where it faces red tape, inefficiencies, and devastating local corruption. By the time the aid trickles down to a remote village, the actual value delivered is a fraction of the original donation.
The proposal here is to surgically bypass that entire multi-layered bureaucracy. One announcement, one massive data transfer, millions of people lifted instantly. And the blueprint doesn't present this as some whimsical, untested hypothesis. It points directly to a massive, historically proven precedent, India's direct benefit transfer system, or DBT.
This is such a cool example.
It really is. To understand how this works mechanically, we have to look at India before 2013. The Indian government spent billions on subsidies, food rations, cooking gas, welfare, but the system was plagued by catastrophic leakage. The blueprint cites figures suggesting that in some welfare schemes, up to 90% of the funds were lost to ghost beneficiaries, which are fake accounts created by corrupt officials, duplicate claims, and middlemen simply skimming the cash.
90%.
Uh-huh.
I mean, imagine pouring water into a bucket, and 90% of it leaks out onto the sand before it reaches the person dying of thirst. It is an administrative failure of epic proportions.
To fix this, India implemented what became known as the JAM Trinity, J-A-M. This stands for Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and Mobile. Let's look at the mechanics of how it bypassed the middlemen. First, Jan Dhan, the government, drove a massive initiative to open basic, no-frills bank accounts for hundreds of millions of unbanked citizens. Second, Aadhaar, they linked those bank accounts directly to the citizen's unique biometric digital ID. Third, Mobile, they tied the entire package to the citizen's mobile phone number for access and notifications.
So instead of sending a truck full of heavily subsidized physical grain to a local distributor who might steal half the grain and sell it on the black market, The government simply takes the cash value of that subsidy and wires it directly, instantly, into the biometrically secured bank account of the citizen. The citizen then uses that cash to buy food at market price. The middleman is completely removed from the equation.
The mathematical results of the jam trinity are undeniable. The blueprint states that by the 2024-2025 financial year, India's DBT system had delivered roughly $520 billion in benefits directly to citizens. By utilizing this biometric pipeline, they saved an estimated $42 billion purely by eliminating ghost beneficiaries and leakage. They expanded welfare coverage from 110 million people to 1.76 billion beneficiaries, and somehow managed to drop subsidy spending as a share of the national budget from 16% down to 9%. It is cited as one of the largest, most successful anti-corruption technological reforms in human history.
So applying the mechanics of the jam trinity to the Malawi proposal, if you have the Everyone app framework in place, the Starlink connectivity ensuring that even the most remote off-grid village has access, and the biometric verification ensuring that one real human being gets exactly one transfer, you can execute that exact same surgical precision on a philanthropic level.
Exactly.
A recipient walks up to a shared community device, scans their face, the system verifies their identity against the decentralized ledger, and the $500 lands in their digital wallet instantly. The overhead administrative cost is functionally zero.
But we have to adjust the pushback here.
Right, because the moment you bring up universal basic income or unconditional cash transfers, the exact same critiques immediately surface. Critics will say this will cause massive local inflation, it causes dependency, it's just a handout. If you give people in extreme poverty a lump sum of unconditional cash, they're going to waste it on alcohol or tobacco or frivolous consumption instead of improving their lives.
It is the most common critique of direct aid, but the blueprint points directly to empirical data to counter it. It cites rigorous, multi-year randomized control trials conducted by organizations like GiveDirectly, which has executed massive unconditional cash transfer programs across various African nations, including Malawi.
And what does the data actually show?
The empirical evidence consistently and aggressively disagrees with the cynical view of human nature. When people living in extreme poverty are given a sudden infusion of unconditional cash, they do not blow it on vice. They act as highly rational economic agents. Mechanistically, what happens? They immediately secure their baseline needs, they improve their household food security, they buy durable, life-altering assets. A massive trend is replacing a thatch roof, which leaks and needs constant repair, with a corrugated tin roof. But crucially, they invest the capital into income-generating ventures. They buy better seeds or farming tools or livestock. They buy inventory to start a small local kiosk.
And a $500 infusion in a country like Malawi is roughly equivalent to several months, if not a year, of average income. It doesn't create lazy dependency, it creates a springboard. It provides the exact liquidity needed to start entrepreneurship and resilience in a way that top-down prescriptive NGO projects like sending a team to build a well that breaks 3 years later often fail to achieve.
It's a totally different philosophy.
It represents a fundamental psychological paradigm shift in how we view charity. Traditional philanthropy is heavily paternalistic. It operates on the assumption that the wealthy donor, or the Western consultant, knows what the recipient needs better than the recipient does. We will give you these specific textbooks, or we will give you this specific type of crop.
Right, takes the agency away.
The direct cash transfer model, powered by biometric infrastructure, flips that dynamic entirely. It says, we trust that you know what you need to survive and thrive right now better than anyone else. You know if you need medicine, or a tin roof, or a bicycle to get to the market, here is the direct financial liquidity to execute your own plan.
If we look at the macro implications, the Mackenzie-Scott proposal is presented merely as the spark. It is the ultimate proof of concept. The blueprint argues that once a direct, biometrically verified cash transfer is demonstrated successfully at a national scale, proving that you can move billions of dollars with zero leakage and immediate measurable human impact, it sets an entirely new global standard for capital distribution.
Well, we would change everything.
Foreign aid agencies could adopt this biometric pipeline. Governments could distribute disaster relief instantly to affected citizens following a hurricane or earthquake. Philanthropy transforms from a slow-moving, heavily bureaucratic mechanism into a frictionless, data-backed surgical strike against extreme poverty.
Think about your own experiences with charitable giving. When you donate $20 to a massive, well-known global charity, there is almost always a lingering doubt in the back of your mind. How much of this $20 is actually going to the cause? How much is paying for the glossy marketing mailers they keep sending me? How much is paying for administrative overhead in a high-rise office?
It's a very common frustration.
Imagine a world where you could tap your phone, securely verify a recipient on the other side of the planet through a decentralized biometric ID, and watch that $20 land directly in their digital wallet in 2 seconds flat. You know with mathematical certainty that your empathy translated to direct, unadulterated impact. That is the true promise of this technology stack. It isn't just about making our daily commutes easier or consolidating our group chats. It is about making human empathy actionable, instantly and efficiently, on a planetary scale.
It is the ultimate expression of trust in the individual, facilitated by a technological architecture that refuses to leave anyone disconnected. The blueprint makes a compelling case that the barriers to this reality are no longer technical. The satellites are in orbit. The cryptographic ledgers function. The mobile devices exist. The barriers are now purely psychological, regulatory, and a matter of political will.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's recap the journey of this deep dive. We started by dissecting Paramendra Kumar Bhagat's visionary blueprint for the Everyone app, a platform designed to eradicate digital friction using an offline-first architecture powered by low Earth orbit satellites, and a privacy-preserving biometric ID system utilizing zero-knowledge proofs. It's a vision of a global, borderless bank account for every human on Earth, accessible from any borrowed piece of hardware.
A really ambitious foundation.
We then grounded that theoretical vision in the massive trillion-dollar reality of the Eastern super apps. We explored how platforms like Gojek in Indonesia, Paytm in India, and Line in Japan built unshakable empires by solving critical, visceral, local infrastructure gaps, proving that eliminating daily friction is the ultimate engine for growth.
Which naturally led us to the heavyweight.
All right, we put WeChat under the microscope, unpacking the behavioral engineering of digital red envelopes and the architectural brilliance of QR code-powered mini-programs, which turned a simple voice messaging tool into the inescapable digital operating system for over 1 billion people in China.
And then the Western pushback.
We pivoted to examine the U.S. anomaly, detailing how a combination of strict antitrust regulation, Apple's walled garden app store policies, deep-seated cultural privacy fears, and a mature, highly competitive market makes the American consumer actively hostile to the centralized super app model.
The clash of ecosystems, basically.
And finally, we explored the ultimate real-world application of this entire technological stack, a radical philanthropic proposal from McKinsey Scott to bypass the NGO industrial complex and use biometric, direct digital transfers to wire $500 to every citizen in Malawi. We saw how adopting the mechanics of India's Jam Trinity could eliminate administrative leakage, revolutionize global philanthropy, and provide a surgical, data-backed mechanism to eradicate extreme poverty by simply trusting individuals with capital.
It's a vast spectrum of human innovation we've covered today, stretching from the purely convenient to the profoundly life-altering. But as we wrap up this analysis, there is a central theme, a single invisible currency that runs through every single topic we've discussed today.
And what's that?
This entire landscape, from the dominance of WeChat to the viability of a biometric direct transfer in Malawi, hinges on one word: trust.
Trust. Wow.
In the East, users trusted a single platform enough to consolidate their entire lives into it, willfully trading their compartmentalized data for unprecedented convenience, financial inclusion, and social connectivity.
Right.
In the West, we largely place our trust in regulators and in our fragmented markets to keep those tech platforms separated. We willingly trade the seamless convenience of a super app to protect our privacy and prevent monopolies from holding the keys to our digital lives.
That's a huge divide.
But the blueprint presents a rapidly approaching inflection point. If the infrastructure of the Everyone app arrives offering free global satellite internet, perfect financial inclusion, frictionless travel, and absolute digital convenience, what are you willing to trade for it? Are you willing to place your trust in a decentralized global biometric ledger?
It's a heavy question.
And perhaps more importantly, if you sitting in the comfort of a mature, functional Western ecosystem refuse to participate because of privacy concerns, are you willing to deny the architecture of that platform to the billions of people in the global South for whom it represents their only viable path out of the shadows and into the digital future?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question we have to grapple with over the next decade. Are we willing to build a world where the architecture of inclusion finally outweighs our fear of connection? Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey through the source material today. We hope this deep dive has given you a new, highly mechanical lens through which to view the apps competing for space on your home screen, the invisible networks beaming data packets over your head, and the massive untapped potential of technology to rewrite the rules of global economics.
It's definitely a lot to think about.
Keep questioning the systems you use every day, and keep exploring the invisible architecture of the digital world around you. And next time you're hiking near a fast-moving river with your smartphone in your pocket, well, maybe hold on tight for now, but just know the day might be rapidly approaching when dropping it in the water won't matter at all. Until next time.